The morning sun streamed through the massive windows of the Blackwood estate, casting long shadows across the marble floors of the dining room. 8-year-old Emma sat at the enormous mahogany table, her small legs swinging beneath her chair as she picked at her breakfast. The scrambled eggs on her plate had grown cold, untouched except for a few reluctant bites she had taken to appease Mrs. Henderson, the housekeeper who had been watching her with growing concern. Marcus Blackwood entered the dining room with his usual purposeful stride, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished marble. At 42, he commanded attention wherever he went, his presence filling rooms with an authority that came from years of building his technology empire from nothing. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit impeccable, and his steel-gray eyes held the sharpness that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said, his voice softening as it always did when he addressed Emma. He leaned down to kiss the top of her head, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "How did you sleep?" Emma looked up at him with wide brown eyes that seemed far too serious for someone her age. "I had that dream again," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the corner. Marcus felt his chest tighten. The dreams had been happening more frequently lately, ever since they had moved into this house 6 months ago. Emma would wake up screaming about shadows in the walls, about voices calling to her from empty rooms. The child psychologist he had consulted assured him it was normal for children who had experienced trauma, but it broke his heart every time he saw the fear in her eyes. "The same one?" he asked gently, pulling out the chair beside her and sitting down. His morning schedule could wait. Emma always came first. She nodded, pushing a piece of egg around her plate with her fork. The lady in the kitchen was there again. She was cooking something that smelled bad, and when I tried to leave, she turned around and her face was all wrong. Marcus reached over and took her small hand in his much larger one. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the morning. "Emma, you know there's no lady in the kitchen at night. Mrs. Henderson goes home every evening, and the new chef doesn't start until this afternoon." "I know," Emma said, but her voice carried a stubborn edge that Marcus had come to recognize. "But she was there. I saw her." Before Marcus could respond, Mrs. Henderson bustled into the dining room, carrying a silver tray laden with fresh coffee and warm pastries. Margaret Henderson had been with the Blackwood family for over 15 years, first working for Marcus's parents before their deaths, and then staying on to help Marcus navigate his new role as guardian to Emma. She was a sturdy woman in her 60s with graying hair pulled back in a neat bun and kind eyes that missed nothing. "Good morning, Mr. Blackwood," she said, setting the tray down on the sideboard. "I trust you slept well." "Well enough," Marcus replied, though the truth was he had been up until 3 in the morning reviewing contracts for a merger that could potentially double his company's value. "Mrs. Henderson, Emma had another nightmare about someone in the kitchen." Mrs. Henderson's expression grew concerned as she poured Marcus his coffee, adding just the right amount of cream without needing to ask. "Poor little lamb," she murmured, casting a sympathetic glance at Emma. "Perhaps we should consider keeping a night light in the hallway near her room? Sometimes shadows can play tricks on young minds." Emma's grip on Marcus's hand tightened. "It wasn't shadows," she insisted, her voice rising slightly. "There was a lady there, and she was cooking something horrible. It smelled like rotten eggs and burnt hair." Marcus exchanged a look with Mrs. Henderson over Emma's head. The housekeeper's expression mirrored his own concern. These nightmares were becoming increasingly vivid and specific, and he was beginning to wonder if they needed to consult a specialist. "Well," Mrs. Henderson said in her most cheerful voice, "perhaps you'll feel better once Chef Laurent arrives this afternoon. She comes very highly recommended, and I'm sure she'll prepare the most wonderful meals for you." At the mention of the new chef, Emma's entire body went rigid. Her fork clattered to her plate, and she turned to stare at Mrs. Henderson with an expression of pure horror. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "No, no, no. She can't come here." Marcus felt alarm bells going off in his head. "Emma, what's wrong? You haven't even met her yet." Emma turned to him, her brown eyes wide with terror and something else that looked almost like recognition. "She's the lady from my dreams," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The one with the wrong face. She's coming here." "Sweetheart, that's impossible," Marcus said gently, though he felt a chill run down his spine. "You've never seen Chef Laurent. I only hired her 2 days ago, and she's been working in France for the past 5 years. But Emma was shaking her head violently, her dark curls bouncing around her face. I know her. I know her smell. I know her voice. She sings while she cooks, but it's not a happy song. It's the song the bad people sing. The reference to bad people made Marcus's blood run cold. Emma rarely spoke about her life before she came to live with him, but he knew enough about her background to understand that she had been exposed to things no child should ever experience. Her mother, Marcus's younger sister Sarah, had fallen into a dangerous world of drugs and criminal associates before her death in a car accident 18 months ago. Emma had been in the car, but had miraculously survived with only minor injuries. The trauma of losing her mother and the months of instability before that had left deep scars on the little girl's psyche. Emma, Marcus said carefully, I need you to listen to me. Chef Laurent is a professional who has worked for some of the most prestigious families in Europe. She has excellent references and has never been involved with any bad people. Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled her hand away from his. You don't believe me, she said, her voice breaking. Nobody ever believes me. That's not true, Marcus said quickly, reaching for her again, but she scooted her chair away from him. I believe that you're scared, and I believe that your dreams feel very real. But sometimes our minds can play tricks on us, especially when we're worried about changes. This isn't a trick, Emma shouted, jumping up from her chair so quickly that it nearly toppled backward. She's dangerous. She hurt people before, and she'll hurt us too. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward, her face creased with worry. Emma, dear, perhaps you should calm down and... No. Emma spun around to face the housekeeper, her small face flushed with emotion. You don't understand. None of you understand. She's not really a chef. She's one of them. One of the bad people who took Mommy away. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Emma had never before directly connected her nightmares to her mother's death. He stood up slowly, his mind racing as he tried to process what she was saying. Could there be some connection he had missed? Had his background check on Chef Laurent been thorough enough? Emma, he said, his voice carefully controlled. I want you to tell me exactly what you remember about this woman from your dreams. Can you describe what she looks like? Emma wiped her nose with the back of her hand, leaving a small smear across her cheek. She has yellow hair, but it's not real yellow. It's like the color of old teeth. And she has a scar here. Emma traced a line along her left cheek, and her eyes are too close together. She always wears red lipstick, but it's too dark, like blood. Marcus felt his mouth go dry. The description was remarkably detailed for a child's nightmare, and something about it nagged at him. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his emails until he found the professional headshot that Chef Laurent had submitted with her application. The woman in the photo had blonde hair and was wearing red lipstick, though the image quality made it difficult to make out specific details about scars or the spacing of her eyes. Mrs. Henderson, he said, his voice tight with tension, would you please take Emma to the library and stay with her? I need to make some phone calls. Mrs. Henderson nodded immediately, recognizing the gravity in his tone. Of course, Mr. Blackwood. Emma, shall we go read some stories? But Emma wasn't finished. She looked up at Marcus with desperate eyes, her small hands clenched into fists at her sides. Please don't let her come here, she pleaded. Please, Marcus. I'm not lying. I would never lie to you about something this important. Marcus knelt down so that he was at eye level with her, his hands resting gently on her shoulders. I know you wouldn't lie to me, sweetheart. And I promise you that I will look into this very carefully before Chef Laurent arrives. If there's any reason to be concerned, she won't set foot in this house. Emma searched his face for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether she could trust his words. Finally, she nodded and allowed Mrs. Henderson to take her hand and lead her out of the dining room. As soon as they were gone, Marcus pulled out his phone and dialed his head of security, James Morrison. Morrison had been with Blackwood Industries for 8 years and had previously worked for the FBI. If anyone could dig up information quickly and thoroughly, it was him. Morrison, came the gruff voice on the other end of the line. James, I need you to run a comprehensive background check on someone immediately. Her name is Celeste Laurent, French national, currently residing in Lyon. I hired her as a private chef, but I need to know everything about her past, especially any connections to criminal activity or drug trafficking. There was a brief pause. Is there a specific reason for concern, sir? Marcus hesitated. How could he explain that his 8-year-old ward was having nightmares about a woman she had never met? Let's call it a precautionary measure. I need the report within 2 hours. Understood. I'll get right on it. Marcus ended the call and stood in the empty dining room, staring out at the perfectly manicured gardens beyond the windows. The rational part of his mind told him that Emma's fears were the product of trauma and an overactive imagination. But another part of him, the part that had learned to trust his instincts in business and in life, was telling him to pay attention to what she was saying. He thought back to the day he had first met Emma, 6 months after Sarah's death. She had been living with a series of temporary foster families, each placement lasting only a few weeks before she was moved again. The social worker had warned him that Emma was a difficult child, prone to violent outbursts and claiming to see things that weren't there. But when Marcus had walked into that sterile meeting room and seen her sitting alone at a table that was too big for her, wearing clothes that didn't fit properly and clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, he had known immediately that he would do whatever it took to bring her home. The transition hadn't been easy. Emma had spent the first month barely speaking, jumping at every sound and refusing to sleep alone. But gradually, with patience and consistency, she had begun to open up. She was incredibly intelligent, reading at a level far above her age, and she had an almost uncanny ability to sense people's true intentions. More than once, she had warned him about business associates who later proved to be untrustworthy. Could this be another instance of her unusual intuition, or was it simply the manifestation of her ongoing trauma? His phone buzzed with a text message from Morrison. Initial search complete. Found some concerning information. Coming to the house now. Marcus felt his stomach drop. Morrison never used words like concerning lightly. He made his way to his home office, a spacious room lined with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and dominated by a massive oak desk that had belonged to his grandfather. He had barely settled into his leather chair when he heard the front door chime, followed by Mrs. Henderson's voice greeting Morrison. James Morrison was a compact man in his 50s with graying hair and sharp blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of his surroundings. He entered the office carrying a tablet and wearing the grim expression that Marcus had learned to associate with bad news. "What did you find?" Marcus asked without preamble. Morrison set his tablet on the desk and turned it so Marcus could see the screen. Celeste Laurent is indeed a trained chef, and she has worked for several high-profile families in Europe. However, there are some significant gaps in her employment history that raised red flags. The screen showed a timeline with several periods marked in red. These gaps, Morrison continued, correspond to times when she was reportedly traveling, but I couldn't find any record of where she went or what she was doing. More concerning is this. He swiped to a new screen showing a police report in French. 3 years ago, Laurent was questioned in connection with the death of her employer, a wealthy businessman in Marseille named Henri Dubois. Dubois died from what appeared to be food poisoning, but the investigation was inconclusive. Marcus felt a chill run through him. Was she charged with anything? No, but only because the evidence was circumstantial. However, I found 2 other similar cases in her background. In each instance, she was working as a private chef for wealthy individuals who died under suspicious circumstances involving food or drink. Morrison swiped to another screen. This is where it gets really interesting. I ran her photo through facial recognition software and cross-referenced it with international criminal databases. Celeste Laurent appears to be an alias. Her real name is Celeste Moreau, and she has connections to a drug trafficking organization that operated out of Detroit 5 years ago. Marcus's blood turned to ice. Detroit. That's where Sarah was living when she died. Exactly. And here's the part that's going to really concern you. Morrison pulled up another document. Celeste Moreau was arrested in Detroit 18 months ago on suspicion of involvement in a drug operation, but she was released due to lack of evidence. The arrest was made just 2 weeks before your sister's fatal car accident. The room seemed to spin around Marcus as the implications hit him. Emma's fears weren't the product of nightmares or trauma-induced hallucinations. Somehow, she had recognized a woman who might have been connected to her mother's death. There's more. Morrison continued grimly. I contacted a source in the Detroit PD who worked on the drug trafficking case. According to him, Celeste Moreau was suspected of being an enforcer for the organization, someone who eliminated people who became liabilities. Her method of choice was poisoning, often administered through food or drink to make the deaths appear accidental or natural. Marcus stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. She's supposed to arrive here in 3 hours. Not anymore, Morrison said, already pulling out his phone. I'm calling local law enforcement now. We need to. He was interrupted by a scream from somewhere in the house. It was Emma's voice, high-pitched and terrified, and it cut through Marcus like a knife. Both men ran from the office, following the sound down the long hallway toward the library. They found Emma pressed against the tall windows that looked out onto the back garden, her face white with terror. Mrs. Henderson was beside her, trying to calm her down, but Emma was pointing frantically at something outside. She's here. Emma was sobbing. She's here early. I saw her by the kitchen door. Marcus looked out the window, but saw nothing except the carefully maintained landscaping and the stone path that led to the service entrance. Emma, I don't see anyone. She was there. Emma insisted. She had a big bag, and she was looking up at the windows. When she saw me, she smiled, but it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile from my dreams. Morrison was already on his radio, calling for backup from the security team that monitored the estate's perimeter. All units, we have a potential intruder on the property. Female suspect, blonde hair, considered dangerous. Do not approach alone. Marcus knelt down beside Emma, his heart racing. Sweetheart, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You were right about Chef Laurent. She's not who she pretended to be, and she might be dangerous. I'm going to make sure she can't hurt anyone. Emma threw her arms around his neck, clinging to him with desperate strength. I tried to tell you, she whispered against his shoulder. I tried to warn you, but I didn't know how to make you understand. You did perfectly, Marcus assured her, stroking her hair. You were so brave to tell me about your dreams. Because of you, we know to be careful. Morrison's radio crackled to life. Based to Morrison, we've got eyes on a female matching the description. She's attempting to access the kitchen through the service entrance. What are your orders? Detain her, but maintain distance, Morrison replied. Local law enforcement is en route. Marcus felt Emma trembling in his arms. Mrs. Henderson, please take Emma upstairs to her room and stay with her. Lock the door and don't open it for anyone except me or Morrison. Of course, Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Henderson said, though her usually steady voice was shaking slightly. Come along, dear. We'll go read some stories until this is all sorted out. Emma pulled back to look at Marcus, her brown eyes still wide with fear, but also with a maturity that broke his heart. Be careful, she whispered. She's very good at pretending to be nice, but she's not. She's very, very bad. I'll be careful, Marcus promised. And Emma, thank you for protecting us. You're the bravest little girl I know. As Mrs. Henderson led Emma from the room, Morrison's radio crackled again. Based to Morrison. Subject is requesting to speak with Mr. Blackwood. She says there's been a misunderstanding and she can explain everything. Morrison looked at Marcus with raised eyebrows. What do you want to do? Marcus thought for a moment. Every instinct told him to stay as far away from this woman as possible, but another part of him wanted to look her in the eye and understand what her connection to Sarah had been. Is she secured? Affirmative. She's in custody with 2 officers present. Then I want to talk to her. But we do it here, in the house, with backup present. 20 minutes later, Marcus stood in his study watching through the window as 2 police officers escorted a blonde woman up the front steps of his house. Even from a distance, he could see that Emma's description had been remarkably accurate. The woman's hair was indeed an artificial-looking blonde, and she wore dark red lipstick that seemed too harsh for her pale complexion. When she entered the study flanked by the officers, Marcus got his first clear look at Celeste Laurent, or Celeste Moreau, or whatever her real name was. She was younger than he had expected, probably in her early 30s, with sharp features and pale blue eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the room. There was indeed a faint scar along her left cheek, just as Emma had described. Mr. Blackwood, she said, her voice carrying a slight French accent that sounded authentic. I believe there has been some sort of misunderstanding. Your security team has treated me very rudely, and I demand to know why I'm being detained. Marcus studied her carefully. She was playing the role of an offended innocent perfectly, but there was something in her eyes that reminded him of the predators he had encountered in the business world. People who could smile while they destroyed you. The misunderstanding, Marcus said quietly, is that you applied for a job under false pretenses. Your real name is Celeste Moreau, and you have connections to criminal organizations in Detroit. For just a moment, her mask slipped, and Marcus saw something cold and calculating flash across her features. Then the innocent expression returned. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. My name is Celeste Laurent, and I have all the proper documentation to prove it. If someone has told you otherwise, they are mistaken or lying. We know about Henri Dubois, Morrison said from his position by the door, and the other employers who died while you were working for them. This time, the mask didn't slip back into place quite as quickly. Celeste's eyes narrowed, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the woman Emma had been so afraid of. Accidents happen, she said, her accent becoming less pronounced. Wealthy old men often have health problems. It's not my fault if they don't take care of themselves. What about my sister? Marcus asked, his voice deadly quiet. Sarah Blackwood. Did you know her? Celeste tilted her head, pretending to think. I don't recall anyone by that name. Should I? She died in Detroit 18 months ago. Car accident. But you were arrested there just 2 weeks before her death. Ah, Celeste said, and now her smile was entirely different. It was the smile Emma had described, cold and predatory. Sarah. Yes, I remember Sarah. Sweet girl, but she had such poor judgment when it came to the people she associated with. Marcus felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. What happened to her? Nothing that wasn't going to happen eventually, Celeste said with a shrug. She owed money to some very unforgiving people. When you can't pay your debts in that world, there are consequences. Did you kill her? Celeste laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I didn't need to. Sarah was so paranoid by the end, jumping at shadows, convinced everyone was out to get her. It's amazing how fear can make people do stupid things, like driving too fast on icy roads while looking over their shoulder. Marcus realized she was confessing without actually admitting to anything concrete. But you were there. You knew her. I knew of her. And I knew she had a daughter, a strange little girl who saw things she shouldn't have seen. Children can be so inconvenient when they witness the wrong things. The threat was clear, and Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. You came here for Emma. I came here for a job, Celeste said, but her eyes were gleaming with malicious satisfaction. It's just a happy coincidence that the job would put me in the same house as a little girl who might remember things she shouldn't remember. One of the police officers stepped forward. Ma'am, I think you should stop talking now. But Celeste seemed beyond caring about consequences. Do you know what your precious Emma saw, Mr. Blackwood? She saw her mother begging for her life. She saw Sarah promise to do anything, pay anything, if we would just leave her daughter alone. And she saw what happened when we explained that some debts can't be paid with money. Marcus lunged forward, but Morrison caught his arm, holding him back. She's trying to provoke you, Morrison warned. Don't give her the satisfaction. Celeste laughed again. The funny thing is, we never would have bothered with the child. She was just collateral damage, not worth our time. But then she had to go and survive the accident, and she had to go and end up with you, one of the richest men in the country. It seemed like fate was offering us a second chance. A second chance at what? Marcus demanded. At finishing what we started, of course. The little girl has seen too much, and now she's in a position where her death would be very profitable. Did you know you're worth more dead than alive, Mr. Blackwood? Your will leaves everything to Emma, and if something were to happen to both of you, well, there are people who would pay handsomely to make sure that fortune ends up in the right hands. The officer stepped between them. That's enough. Celeste Moreau, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder and making terrorist threats. As they read her rights and prepared to take her away, Celeste looked directly at Marcus one last time. You think you've won, but you haven't. There are others, and they know where you live now. That little girl will never be safe, no matter how many guards you hire or how many walls you build around her. After she was gone, Marcus stood in his study feeling like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. Everything he thought he knew about Sarah's death, about Emma's nightmares, about their safety, had changed in the span of an hour. Morrison closed the door and turned to face him. We need to discuss security arrangements immediately. If she's telling the truth about others being involved, this house is no longer safe. Marcus nodded, his mind already racing through possibilities. What are our options? Short term, we can bring in additional security and coordinate with local law enforcement. Long term, you might want to consider relocating, at least temporarily, until we can identify and neutralize any remaining threats. I need to talk to Emma first, Marcus said. She needs to understand what's happening. He found Emma in her bedroom, sitting on her window seat with Mrs. Henderson beside her. The little girl looked up when he entered, her brown eyes searching his face for answers. Is she gone? Emma asked quietly. Yes, sweetheart. She's gone, and she's not coming back. Emma nodded solemnly. But there are others, aren't there? I can feel them thinking about us. Marcus sat down on the bed facing her, marveling once again at her intuitive understanding of complex situations. There might be others, but I want you to know that I will never let anyone hurt you. Whatever it takes, however many people I have to hire, wherever we have to go, you will be safe. I know, Emma said simply. You promised to take care of me, and you always keep your promises. Emma, I need to ask you something important. Do you remember anything else about the people who hurt your mother? Anything that might help us make sure they can't hurt anyone else? Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the gardens below. When she spoke, her voice was very small. There was a man with a snake tattoo on his hand. He was the one who made the decisions. And there was another lady, older than the chef lady, with white hair and mean eyes. They called her grandmother, but she wasn't anybody's real grandmother. Marcus felt Morrison tense beside him. These details could be crucial for identifying the other members of the organization. Anything else? Marcus asked gently. They had a place where they kept things. It smelled like medicine and had lots of bottles. The man with the snake tattoo said it was their kitchen, but it wasn't for cooking food. It was for cooking the bad stuff that made people sick. A drug lab, Morrison murmured. Emma nodded. Mommy took me there once when she couldn't find anyone to watch me. She told me to stay in the car and not look, but I saw through the window. That's when I first saw the chef lady. She was mixing something in a big pot, and when she tasted it, her face got all twisted up like it was terrible. Marcus exchanged a look with Morrison. This information could help law enforcement track down the rest of the organization. Emma, Marcus said carefully, would you be willing to talk to some police officers about what you remember? It might help them catch the bad people so they can't hurt anyone else. Emma considered this seriously. Will you stay with me? Every minute. Then yes. I want to help catch them. They shouldn't be allowed to hurt other mommies and daddies and kids. Over the next several hours, Emma worked with a specially trained child psychologist and detective to provide details about what she had witnessed. Her memory was remarkably clear and specific, and her information led to the identification of 3 other members of the criminal organization, including the man with the snake tattoo, who turned out to be the leader of the drug trafficking ring. As evening approached, Marcus found himself sitting in Emma's room while she got ready for bed. The events of the day had been traumatic, but she seemed calmer now, as if finally being believed and having her fears validated had lifted a weight from her shoulders. Marcus, she said as he tucked her into bed. Yes, sweetheart. I'm sorry I couldn't explain better about the dreams. I didn't know how to make the scary feelings into words that grown-ups would understand. Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. You explained perfectly, Emma. You saved us both today. I'm so proud of how brave you were. Emma smiled, the first genuine smile he had seen from her all day. Mrs. Henderson says we might go on a vacation while the police catch all the bad people. Can we go somewhere with a beach? I've never seen the ocean. We can go anywhere you want, Marcus promised. How about we start looking at pictures of beaches tomorrow? As Emma drifted off to sleep, Marcus sat in the chair beside her bed, watching over her as he had every night since she came to live with him. The events of the day had shown him just how precious and fragile their little family was, but they had also shown him something else. Emma wasn't just a traumatized child who needed his protection. She was an incredibly strong, intuitive, and brave little girl who had already saved their lives once with her warnings. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever other threats they might face, he knew they would face them together. His phone buzzed quietly with a text from Morrison. 3 arrests made based on Emma's information. Drug lab discovered and shut down. Threat assessment indicates immediate danger has passed. Marcus smiled and typed back, "Thank you. We'll discuss long-term security in the morning." As he settled back in his chair to keep watch over Emma's sleep, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since she came into it. Before Emma, his world had been all about business deals and profit margins and strategic acquisitions. Now, his greatest achievement wasn't a successful merger or a record-breaking quarter. It was earning the trust of a little girl who had every reason to believe that adults couldn't be counted on to protect her. Emma stirred in her sleep, murmuring something he couldn't quite make out. But she was smiling, and for the first time in months, her sleep seemed peaceful. No nightmares tonight, Marcus thought. Just dreams of beaches and safe places, and people who would always believe her when she said she was afraid. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. They would need to testify in court, work with law enforcement to ensure all the criminals were caught, and make decisions about their future security. But tonight, they were safe, they were together, and they had proven that no matter what dangers threatened them, they could face them as a family. Marcus reached over and gently smoothed Emma's dark curls away from her face. "Sweet dreams, brave girl," he whispered. "I'll be right here watching over you." Outside, the security team patrolled the grounds, and police cars sat at the gates of the estate. But inside Emma's room, there was only peace and the quiet breathing of a little girl who had finally been heard, believed, and protected by the adults in her life. As the night deepened, Marcus found himself thinking about Sarah and wishing she could know that her daughter was safe and loved. Emma had her mother's eyes and her stubborn streak, but she also had something Sarah had never possessed, the absolute certainty that she was valued and protected. The clock on Emma's nightstand ticked softly toward midnight, marking the end of a day that had changed everything. But as Marcus watched over the sleeping child who had become the center of his world, he knew that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Emma had taught him that sometimes the most important truths come from the smallest voices, and that love and trust could overcome even the darkest threats. In her sleep, Emma smiled and whispered a single word, "Safe." Marcus smiled too, knowing that he had kept his most important promise. Emma was safe, she was loved, and she would never again have to face her fears alone. The little girl who had screamed warnings about danger had saved them all, and in doing so, had shown Marcus what it truly meant to be a family.